The strange truth that the Brooks family would only understand later was that the moment Karen Brooks quietly walked out of the house was the first time in 20 years anyone truly noticed how much of their life had depended on her. For more than 2 decades, Karen Brooks had lived in the same 2-story house on a calm street outside Denver, Colorado, where rows of maple trees lined the sidewalks and neighbors greeted each other during evening walks. To anyone passing by, the Brooks family looked ordinary and stable. Michael Brooks worked as a project manager for a construction company and left for the office early most mornings. Their son Tyler was 22 and had recently started a job at an auto repair shop across town. Their daughter Sophie was finishing her junior year of high school and spent most of her time thinking about friends, classes, and the future she imagined after graduation. In the center of that everyday life stood Karen, though over the years it often felt as if no one really saw her there. Every morning Karen woke at 5:45 before the always quiet at that hour. The kind of peaceful silence that existed only before a family's day began rushing forward. She walked downstairs, started the coffee maker, and opened the refrigerator while mentally organizing everything that needed to happen in the next 12 hours. Eggs and toast for Michael, oatmeal for Sophie, coffee strong enough to help everyone wake up quickly before work and school. Karen moved through the kitchen with the calm efficiency that comes from repeating the same routine thousands of times. By 6:15, the smell of breakfast filled the room, and sunlight began touching the edges of the kitchen window. Michael usually entered first, still thinking about construction schedules and client meetings. He would sit down at the table, glance at his phone, and say a quick good morning before eating. Karen often asked how his day looked ahead, but the answer was usually short and distracted because Michael's attention was already moving toward work. A few minutes later, Sophie hurried into the kitchen with her backpack over one shoulder, an piece of toast, took a sip of orange juice, and rushed toward the door while texting a friend. Tyler came downstairs last when he happened to be home, often half awake and searching for coffee before leaving for his shift at the shop. Within 20 minutes, the house that Karen had filled with food and preparation became empty again. Michael drove toward the highway. Sophie caught a ride with a classmate, and Tyler started the engine of his truck before heading across town. Karen remained behind in the quiet kitchen, rinsing dishes in the sink, while the clock ticked steadily toward 8. After cleaning up, she usually prepared for her own job at the local library, where she worked part-time organizing records and helping visitors find books. The library was only 15 minutes away, and Karen enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere there. People greeted her with smiles, asked for her help, and thanked her when she guided them to the information they needed. Strangely, those small moments often made her feel more visible than she did inside her own home. At the easy to recognize. At home, her efforts had become so familiar that they blended quietly into the background. The years had not started that way. When Karen and Michael first married, they spent long evenings talking about everything from travel dreams to the kind of life they hoped to build together. When Tyler was born, Karen chose to stay home for a while so she could focus on raising him, and later she made the same choice when Sophie arrived 3 years afterward. She told herself that those years would pass quickly and that she could always return to other ambitions later. But as time moved forward, the responsibilities of daily life filled every corner of her schedule. Karen managed school forms, doctor appointments, grocery lists, birthday parties, laundry, dinners, and all the small details that kept the household running smoothly. She also kept track of the family finances, carefully balancing expenses so Michael could focus on his demanding career without worrying about the numbers at home. None of these tasks seemed extraordinary by her that supported the Brooks family's life. The strange thing was that the more efficiently Karen handled everything, the less anyone seemed to notice how much she was doing. Conversations around the dinner table slowly changed as the children grew older and Michael's work required more attention. Tyler talked about his friends or his job at the repair shop. Sophie described school events and the latest news from her social circle. Michael often discussed construction projects or upcoming deadlines. Karen listened carefully to each person, asking questions and making sure everyone felt supported. When she shared something about her own day, the responses were usually brief. "That sounds nice," someone might say, before another topic replaced the moment. Over time, Karen noticed that her words rarely stayed at the center of the conversation for long. It was not intentional neglect. No one meant to ignore her. Life simply moved fast, and everyone assumed she would always be there in the background making things work. The small signs of invisibility appeared gradually acknowledgement because everyone had been busy with work and school. Another evening she suggested a family weekend trip, but the idea disappeared when Tyler mentioned a work shift and Sophie needed to study for exams. Karen smiled and said they could try another time, though deep down she knew the opportunity might never return. Still, she continued her routines with the same steady patience because caring for the family had always been part of who she was. One evening late in autumn, Karen sat alone in the living room while the rest of the house hummed quietly with separate activities. Michael was upstairs finishing emails for a construction project. Sophie was in her room talking with friends through a video call. Tyler had gone out after work and would return later in the night. The television played softly in the background while the warm glow of a lamp illuminated the room Karen had decorated over the years with family photos and small pieces of artwork. She looked around slowly at the walls that held memories of vacations, school graduations, and holidays she had helped build. Yet as she sat there alone, a realization formed gently but clearly in her mind. The people in those photographs loved her, but somewhere along the way they had stopped truly seeing her. Karen did not feel anger when that thought arrived. Instead, she felt something quieter, a kind of calm understanding that had taken years to reach. She had spent decades making sure everyone else's life moved forward comfortably. She had rarely stopped to ask herself what she wanted beyond those responsibilities. The next morning began like every other morning in the Brooks household. Karen woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast, and watched the familiar routine unfold around the kitchen table. Michael spoke briefly about a meeting at work. Sophie mentioned a school project due later that week. Tyler checked his phone while finishing a cup of coffee. Within minutes, they all gathered their belongings and headed toward the door. As always, Karen smiled, wished them a good day, and listened to the sound of the front door closing behind them one by one. For a moment longer than usual. Sunlight filtered through the window and touched the countertop, where she had placed 3 clean plates beside the sink. She looked at the calendar on the refrigerator, then at the hallway leading toward the bedrooms. After a long breath, she walked upstairs and opened the closet in the master bedroom. From the top shelf, she took down a small suitcase that had not been used in years. The action felt calm and deliberate, not rushed or dramatic. Karen folded a few pieces of clothing and placed them neatly inside the suitcase along with a book she had been meaning to read and a notebook she once used for writing personal thoughts. When she finished packing, she carried the suitcase downstairs and set it near the front door. On the kitchen table, she placed a simple note written in clear handwriting. The message was short and honest, explaining that she needed time away to rediscover herself, and that sometimes the only way to be truly seen was to step out of the background where everyone expected you to remain. Not with sadness, but with a quiet sense of clarity. Then she picked up the suitcase, opened the front door, and stepped outside into the bright Colorado morning. Hours later, when Michael returned home from work, the house felt strangely still. The kitchen counters were clean, but no dinner was cooking on the stove. Tyler arrived soon after and noticed the same unusual silence. Sophie came downstairs searching for a snack and asked where her mother was. It was only then that they saw the note on the table and realized that the person who had quietly held their entire world together for more than 20 years was no longer there to keep everything running the way it always had. And if this story reminds you that the quiet presence of someone in your life might be far more important than you realize, take a moment to appreciate the people who hold things together every day. And if you believe stories like this help us reflect on what truly matters, you can support this channel by subscribing and sharing these moments with others who value